Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and I finally have this figure here to take a look at. This is one that has been eluding me for quite some time. In fact, I actually ordered it from Target.com, and when it had arrived, they sent me the Mosasaurus of all things, as opposed to this figure, which was just like the craziest thing that you could possibly send outside of, some other roar attack. Instead, they send me the newer Mosasaurus. But anyway, it came back up on Target.com and I was able to place an order a second time, putting my faith in them a second time. And I don't know why I did that, but it actually turned out that I was actually going to get the figure this time as opposed to a different one. And Ankylosaurus Bumpy has finally arrived here. This one is still non-existent in stores near me. I have not seen it yet. And I've seen almost every one of the other newer figures at one point or another in store, but this one. So this one's a little tough to find. It seems as though Bumpy's, I guess, pretty popular nowadays. But as far as the box art goes, you can see that it's kind of your standard Dino Escape Camp Cretaceous box art, which is just, again, absolutely beautiful. We, of course, can see Bumpy right here with that super obnoxious button on the top. And then here on the back of the packaging, another image of Bumpy with kind of an example of how the tail works, and then an image down here of the other two Roar Attack figures that are in this wave. So let's pop it out of its box and take a look at it. And here is our Bumpy, and the feet are not exactly placed correctly, but there we go. There is our Bumpy figure, and honestly, she looks fantastic. I'm really happy with this one as far as the sculpt and paint application. I think it's honestly the nicest Ankylosaurus that Mattel has released so far, or at least it would be if it weren't for the stupid button up here on the top. That really drops the appeal factor down quite a bit, but it's not the worst thing in the world. It's definitely an eyesore for sure, but even with that, I still feel like this might be the best Ankylosaurus that Mattel has released. The sculpt is nice, and it looks very similar to all of the previous Mattel Ankylosaurus sculpts. I don't know how different it truly is, but the paint application on this one I feel like is much nicer in comparison to a lot of the other ones, especially because it just seems like it has a better paint app, like with the head and the way that that kind of like sort of yellowish tone of color creeps through all of the scales, which we'll see here in a little bit. And the nice spots of blue and stuff running down along the side and down the legs. Everything as far as that goes looks really nice, and again, a lot nicer than the previous Ankylosaurus figures from Mattel has. But anyway, let's go ahead, jump straight to a closer look right now. So starting up here at the head sculpt of Bumpy, you can see that, as per usual, when it comes to a Mattel figure, that the detailing is very nicely done, quite abundant, and also really quite vibrant. I feel like the newer figures from Mattel have just been sporting some of the most vibrant detail that I've seen from any of the Mattel line. The last probably like 10 releases or so have probably been some of the nicest detail-wise that I think we've seen in the line yet. And you can see that the actual paintwork looks really nice up here on the face, because there's kind of like this dark yellowish coloration that's almost like the primary body color of Bumpy, but you have that very cool, very trademark Bumpy blue coloration that kind of leaks all over, and they've done a very good job of applying that. And it really pays off in the overall grand scheme of things as far as giving some color variation and just making the entire thing just look so much more appealing. And you can see how I was talking about with that kind of yellowish coloration creeping through the blue and everything up here on the head. That looks really cool. Definitely a lot more appealing than it just being one solid bluish coloration. I really quite like that. And you can see that we have kind of like a light gray for some of the armored areas, but a darker gray here for the beak. You can also see the nostrils are sculpted out right there. As we move back here into the back of Bumpy, you can see that the scale detail here in the armored area of Bumpy continues to look gorgeous. Absolutely beautiful scale detail, and again, very vibrant detail. Like, it really pops on the model in a much more impressive way than I feel like the older Mattel figures did. And of course, we have that light gray for all of the armor up here on the back, all of those bumps that run along the back of Bumpy. And then you can see the same deal for the kind of spikes that run along the side of Bumpy. Those areas do sport some decent detail, but they're not overly detailed, which you can see. But they definitely look nice. There's a little bit of a seam here between the spikes and the back of Bumpy. I'm not too sure why. I don't know if it's like that over here. Doesn't look like it. No, not really, so I'm not sure what's going on there. But again, it looks really quite nice, and we primarily only have that blue and light gray up here. And you can see as we continue to run down here into the tail that the coloration continues to look pretty nice, but they stopped painting these areas here, the kind of like bumps and stuff that run along the back of the armor and the spikes. The spikes have a little bit of paint, but not too much. It's almost like they got to the tail and were just like, I give up. And you can see that even further out here into the club, as the club tail isn't painted very well. You can see that only this area here, I would say like 80%, maybe 90% of the tail was given, well, club, not tail, but was given the grayish coloration, and they just completely missed that area right there. I don't know why. The detailing of the tail definitely looks nice. The detailing of the club looks beautiful, but they just kind of slopped up the paint. And you can see the underside looks a little better, but not spectacular by any means. You can see that the detailing on the underside of Bumpy as well is quite beautifully done, just like we saw on the upper side. There actually is the Jurassic Facts app code. If you would like to add this to your collection, you can see that there is a slight speckling here with kind of like a blue or a black throughout Bumpy, we do see. And I love again that we have this kind of like bluish coloration that runs down here and just kind of spots and designs and splotches all over the side of Bumpy. I think that is fantastic as far as the paintwork goes. And you can of course see that the legs look great from a detailing standpoint. The Ankylosaurus is just walking along, and you can see that nicely displayed in the pose of the dinosaur as well. But you can see as we move down, we've got the elbow present. Really nice detailing all the way throughout the front leg as far as the scale detail goes, even including the wrist. Really nice foot sculpt, unfortunately. No painted nails, which is no surprise. The scale detail continues to look incredible here on the side of Bumpy. I really wish Mattel made like very high quality models of these, because it would just be insane with how nicely done the sculpts are. You can see again that the detailing here in the rear leg also looks quite beautiful. You have some very nice kind of tensing and muscle definition displayed in the rear leg. The ankle is nicely displayed. Foot sculpt looks decent yet again, but no nail paint, surprise, surprise. And then if we look at the opposing side, again, same deal as far as the sculpting and detailing of the legs and stomach region. It all looks beautiful, and Mattel has done an absolutely phenomenal job, I would say, on the sculpt of this Ankylosaurus. So definitely a really, really beautiful interpretation of an adult Bumpy. As far as articulation on Bumpy, we have really nice head articulation. You can see that you can pose the head quite beautifully. That's definitely a very, very smooth style of articulation to the head sculpt, and I love that addition to the figure. We of course have articulation as well in the legs. All four legs articulate, and then we have articulation here in the tail, but the articulation in the tail is actually part of the action feature. So if we activate that, we're going to not only hear the roar attack, but we'll see the action feature as well. So it works pretty well. I mean, decent for the most part. If you actually kind of like move this quickly so that the tail kind of strikes, however, the noises are going to be super jumbled. So if we do that, so that's almost like a little bit of a downside as far as a playability standpoint goes, because if the dinosaur is, attacking something and actually swinging the tail using the action feature, the noises are just so erratic and all over the place. So maybe not the best way to do this as far as the tail articulation on this figure goes. And I see that Mattel again is continuing with the trend of the button, which is, a little innovative, a little different than a lot of their previous releases. I definitely hope that we get all of the newer figures again without the button. That would definitely be a plus. Even though people aren't really huge fans of repaints, I would definitely like to see the sculpts get reused, and specifically I would like to see another Bumpy, but I don't think that'll happen, at least as far as like this coloration goes. They'd probably change it at least a little bit. But again, the fact that once you actually move the button to articulate the tail in kind of a defensive manner, the noises get so jumbled. It would have been better if they just you move the tail and the noise goes until it's done, but you can keep going. But, I mean, it is what it is. It's just a little bit of a nitpick as far as the figure goes. But as far as a size on our Bumpy, for a length, actually, let's get the tail back straight out. For a length, you are looking at right around the 9 3/4 inch range, or about the 24.5 centimeter area, and then for a height, the highest point's probably the back of the tail right here. You're looking at just shy of 3 inches or 7.5 centimeters. And then if we go to the top of the head, about 2.25 inches or about 6 centimeters. For a size comparison, we've got Mr. Papo T-Rex, the Attack Pack Colovosaurus, and Robert Muldoon from the Mattel Jurassic World toy line in comparison to our Roar Attack Bumpy the Ankylosaurus. And you can see that as far as Bumpy goes, being a Roar Attack figure, you know you are getting a decently sized figure, as those are usually quite large, but you also can see that this sports the exact same size pretty much as all of the previous Mattel Ankylosaurus figures. So this brand new Roar Attack Bumpy the Ankylosaurus figure is definitely a kind of a mixed bag. It's a really fun release. The sculpt looks fantastic and the paintwork looks fantastic. Even the eyes are actually quite nicely painted, which is one thing I kind of failed to mention when taking that closer look. The eyes do look pretty decent for the most part, but the figure does suffer from that very awkward button on the top. And it wouldn't be so bad if there was some sort of a more appealing way to apply that button without there being like huge drop-offs on the back there, kind of like open gaping holes when you are using the button. And I honestly don't know how they would go about doing that, but I feel like that really takes away a lot as far as the appeal factor of the figure, especially when it comes to something like Bumpy, where like it's right on the top, super visible. Like with the Baryonyx and the Ceratosaurus, the area where that was apparent wasn't so distracting, but with Bumpy, it's really quite distracting because it's in such a visible area, and it's even worse with the upcoming Oranosaurus. That one is just like almost a nightmare to look at, but the figure, if you move past that aspect, is beautifully done. They have given us yet again another gorgeous sculpt as far as Bumpy goes, perfectly in my opinion, replicating the adult Bumpy from Camp Cretaceous. And they've also applied some beautiful paint application for the most part, a good bit nicer I would say than the previous Mattel Ankylosaurus figures, because we have a lot more color to Bumpy, whereas we have like the kind of yellowish, that darker yellowish coloration creeping in between so many different areas of like the blue that's kind of splattered on the face, the legs, the stomach region. It's just so much more appealing on this one than the previous figures were. So it's sort of like a mixed bag. Like I really like the figure, but at the same time I'm a little disappointed because of that button on the back. But you know, it's like a 50-50, I would say, because it's half really, really nice and more like 3/4 really, really nice and like 25% distracting because of that button. The action feature is iffy, you know, it works okay, it does what it's meant to do, but the fact that once you actually kind of use it for a tail strike action feature, the button kind of jumbles the sounds from Bumpy, so that is as well a little bit of a downside. So again, it's definitely a fun release, but it's not the most appealing action feature or anything as far as that goes. So if you are interested in picking this up, I will include a link in the description to Target.com where I purchased mine, or otherwise you could check your local Walmart or Target, as it has been showing up in both of those stores. One way or another, it's still a pretty fun Ankylosaurus, so if you do find it, make sure you pick it up, and make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.